Nora Ellis felt the hum in her teeth the moment the kitchen door swung open at 2 in the morning, and she knew, with every ounce of certainty her wrecked little life had taught her, that she was about to lose everything she had spent 6 years hiding. She did not look up. She kept her hands in the bread dough, kept her knuckles pressing into the flour-dusted counter, kept her eyes fixed on the cracked tile beneath the oven, where a spider had built something ambitious and doomed. The footsteps behind her were not kitchen footsteps. Kitchen footsteps shuffled. Kitchen footsteps dragged. These landed with the kind of weight that came from someone who had never once doubted their right to occupy any room they entered. "You are up late," said a voice that had no business being in a service corridor at this hour. Nora punched the dough. "I work here. At 2 in the morning. Bread does not care what time it is." She felt him move closer, not toward her, toward the counter beside her, where he leaned with the casual authority of someone who had probably never leaned against anything that was not polished marble. The iron-holed kitchen counters were not polished marble. They were scarred oak stained with a decade of soup and regret. Ethan Cole, sole heir to the Alpha King's throne, firstborn of the Ashwood bloodline, the wolf whose bonding choice was the only thing the entire territory had talked about for 3 straight months, stood in her flour cloud and said nothing. Nora kept kneading. The hum in her teeth grew louder. She had been born with it, this curse disguised as a gift. The ability to feel the invisible threads that connected wolves to their true mates, the bonds that ran deeper than politics or strategy, or the careful matchmaking the Elder Council had turned into an art form over the last 2 centuries. Most wolves never found their true bond. The Council made sure of that. Real bonds were inconvenient. They crossed bloodlines and class barriers and territorial agreements. They made a mess of everything the powerful had spent generations arranging. Nora could feel every single one of them. They buzzed in her jaw like a low electrical current whenever 2 bonded wolves occupied the same space. And in the 6 years she had worked the iron-holed kitchens, she had learned to live with the constant ache of it. 300 wolves passed through this compound every season, and at least 40 of them were mated to the wrong person, while their real bond sat 3 tables away, equally unaware, equally trapped. She had told someone once about their bond, about the thread she could feel humming between them and another wolf they had never spoken to. She had been 17, and stupid enough to believe that truth was a thing people wanted. Her mother paid for that mistake with her disappearance. Nora had not spoken about the bonds since, and now the heir to the Alpha King was standing close enough that the hum had become a roar, and the thread she felt was not pointing away from him toward some distant, unknown mate. It was pointing at her. "You are the girl who does the bread," Ethan said. "I am the woman who does the bread, and the rolls, and the pastry for the 3rd course, and whatever Clara burns when she is in one of her moods, which is every day that ends in a letter." He almost smiled. She saw it in her peripheral vision, the way his mouth twitched at one corner like it wanted permission from the rest of his face. It did not get it. The heir to the Ashwood line did not smile in kitchens at 2 in the morning. His jaw reset itself into the hard line that had been carved there by a lifetime of being watched. "I could not sleep," he said. "There is warm milk in the cold room, 2nd shelf, behind the cream for tomorrow's trifle." "I did not come for milk." Nora stopped kneading. She made herself breathe. In through the nose, out through the mouth, the way her mother had taught her before her mother became a ghost story and a locked file in the registry office. She could feel the bond now, like a physical pressure behind her eyes, a sound pitched just below hearing, a vibration in every bone of her hands. She had felt hundreds of bonds before. None of them had felt like this. This one felt like standing at the edge of a cliff in a high wind, and understanding, with perfect clarity, that the wind was not going to push her off. She was going to jump. "Then what did you come for?" she said, and her voice came out flat, because she had practiced flat, the way other wolves practiced combat drills. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. She could feel him studying her, and she knew what he was seeing. An omega with flour in her hair and a burn scar on her left wrist from a soup pot that had betrayed her in her first week. No pack markings, no family crest. The kind of wolf who existed in the margins of every official document, referenced only in head counts and never by name. "Something is wrong with me," he said. Nora looked at him for the first time. She wished she had not. He was the kind of wolf that made you forget your own name for a dangerous half-second. Not because of the jawline or the shoulders or the eyes that were the gray-green of lake water in winter, because of the way he held himself, like every muscle in his body was engaged in the full-time project of keeping something enormous under control. "Wrong how?" she said. "I can feel something in my chest, like a pull. It started 3 days ago, and it is getting stronger, and it only stops when I am in this part of the compound." 3 days ago was when Nora had arrived from the lower kitchens to help prepare for the gala. She picked up the dough and slapped it onto the counter hard enough to send a puff of flour into the air between them. "Sounds medical," she said. "The healers are in the East Wing. I went to the healers, they found nothing. Then it is probably gas." That almost smile again. This time it got a little further before his face caught it and wrestled it back down. "You are not afraid of me," he said, and it was not a question. "I am afraid of everything," Nora said. "You are just not at the top of the list." That was a lie. He had just rocketed to the very top of the list, above the Elder Council, and the dark archive where her mother's records were buried, and the locked door in her own memory that she never opened. Because if the heir to the Alpha King could feel their bond from his side, if it was reaching him without her gift, without her doing anything to activate it, then this bond was something she had never encountered before, something the old texts called a marrow bond, a connection so deep it could not be suppressed or redirected or politically rearranged. A bond the council would kill to control, or kill to destroy. "The gala is in 3 days, Nora said, and she turned back to her dough with the careful precision of someone diffusing a device. "You have 4 candidates from the Great Packs. Your father needs you mated before the succession. The council has been planning this for a year. I know what the council has been planning. Then go plan with them. This is a kitchen, not a therapy office." He pushed off the counter. She thought he was leaving. Her body relaxed by exactly 1 fraction, and that fraction was a mistake, because he did not leave. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating off him like a wall of heat. A wall. She would think about that later, how he felt like a wall, how walls were supposed to block your path, but this one felt like it was holding something up that had been sagging for years. "What is your name?" he said. "Nora." "Nora what?" "Nora, mind your business." "Ellis," he said. "I looked it up. Nora Ellis. No pack affiliation, no family listed, no bloodline registered. You appeared in the system 6 years ago like you materialized out of thin air." The dough tore under her hands. "People do not materialize," she said. "People get overlooked. It is a different thing entirely. I am not overlooking you." "That," Nora said quietly, "is exactly what I am afraid of." She could feel the bond now, like a living thing between them, a third presence in the room that neither of them had invited. It wanted to be seen. It wanted to be spoken aloud. It wanted the thing that every true bond wanted, which was acknowledgement. And acknowledgement was the one thing Nora could not afford to give it. Because once a bond was spoken, it could not be unspoken. Once the council knew it existed, they would trace it. They would trace her. They would find the anomaly in her blood, the genetic marker that had not appeared in the Omega lines for 6 generations, the one that let her feel every hidden bond in the territory. They would find out what happened the last time a wolf with her gift tried to tell the truth. Ethan watched her for another long moment. Then he straightened, and something in his posture shifted. The commanding presence pulled back, not gone but reined in, like a tide retreating from a shore it had no right to touch. "I will come back tomorrow," he said. "I will not be here." "You will be here. You have 600 rolls to bake for the second night reception." Nora stared at him. "You looked up my work schedule." "I looked up everything about you, Nora Ellis. There was almost nothing to find. That, by itself, tells me something." He left. The kitchen door swung shut behind him, and the hum in Nora's teeth settled back to its usual low ache, still there but manageable, the way a headache was manageable once you stopped looking at the sun. She stood in the flour dust and the silence and the fading warmth of where he had been, and she did the only thing she could think to do. She opened her cracked phone, navigated to the Ironhold staff portal, and submitted a transfer request to the mountain outpost, 400 miles north. A skeleton crew. No gala, no council, no heir with gray-green eyes who looked at her like she was a code he intended to break. Effective the morning after the Bonding Gala. She would be gone before this thing between them grew teeth. Her hands were shaking when she set the phone down. She went back to the dough. It was overworked now, too tough, ruined by the extra minutes of kneading she had used to keep her hands busy, while her entire life rearranged itself around a 2-minute conversation in a dark kitchen. She threw the dough away and started a new batch. Some things could not be salvaged. The trick was knowing which ones before you wasted your whole life trying. He came back the next night, just as he had promised. And the night after that, Nora did not submit a second transfer request. She told herself it was because the system only allowed one pending request at a time. She told herself a lot of things in those 3 nights, and every single one of them was a lie she could feel dissolving like sugar in hot water, too sweet, too fast, and impossible to reverse. The gala was coming. The 4 candidates were already in residence, their families occupying the guest wings like small armies of silk and strategy. The compound buzzed with preparation and tension, and the particular electricity that filled any room where the future of an entire people was about to be decided by one wolf's outstretched hand. Nora baked. She kneaded and rolled and scored and glazed, and she pretended that the hum in her teeth was not getting louder every hour. She pretended she was still invisible. She pretended she was still safe. Ethan Cole had not slept in 4 days, and his wolf was doing something it had never done before. It was quiet. His wolf had been a constant presence since he was 13, a restless, pacing thing behind his ribs that responded to everything. Threat, desire, anger, the particular low-grade irritation that came from sitting through council meetings where old men argued about grazing rights, like the fate of the world depended on which herd crossed which river. His wolf always had an opinion. His wolf was, frankly, exhausting. Now it was silent, not gone, present, but still, like a dog that had finally found the exact patch of sunlight it had been searching for, and was not going to move for anything short of the apocalypse. It had gone still, the first time he walked past the kitchen corridor. He had been walking the compound at night because the alternative was lying in his bed, staring at the ceiling, while the weight of the succession crushed the air out of him, one slow pound at a time. His father was dying. The healers had stopped pretending otherwise 3 weeks ago, and now every conversation in the compound carried the metallic undertone of a countdown. The Elder Council wanted him mated before his father's last breath. The 4 Great Pack families had each sent their most strategic daughter. The entire machinery of the wolf world was aimed at this one event, this one choice, and Ethan was supposed to stand on a dais in 3 days and pick a mate the way other people picked fruit. He had reviewed the candidates the way he reviewed everything, thoroughly, clinically, with the detached precision his father had drilled into him since he was old enough to understand that being an heir meant being a weapon first and a person second. Margaret Ashworth, eldest daughter of the Northern Pack, intelligent, composed, carried herself like someone who had been trained to sit on a throne since birth. Her father controlled the northern trade routes and had made it delicately clear that a bonding would come with favorable terms on the timber agreements that were currently strangling Ashwood's construction plans. Diana Price, second daughter of the Eastern Pack, sharper than Margaret, more volatile. Her wolf was strong enough that Ethan could feel it pressing against the edges of any room she entered, testing, probing. She did not want to be chosen. She wanted to win. The distinction mattered. Sophie Lane, the Western Pack's offering, young, barely 20, with a softness that Ethan suspected was carefully constructed. She watched everyone with the quiet attention of someone cataloging weaknesses, and when she smiled, it never quite reached the analytical coldness behind her eyes. Charlotte Vane, Southern Pack, the wild card. She had arrived with no entourage, no political handlers, no carefully prepared talking points. She was the only candidate who had looked Ethan directly in the eye during the welcome reception and said, "This is ridiculous, and we both know it, so let us at least try to be honest with each other." He had almost liked Charlotte, almost was as close as he got with anyone. None of them made his wolf react, not a twitch, not a flicker. He had stood in the same room with each of them, waited for the pull, the instinct, the thing every bonding text described as unmistakable, and felt nothing but the low-grade hum of political machinery doing what political machinery did. Then he walked past the kitchen corridor, and his wolf dropped into a silence so profound it felt like the world had stopped spinning. He found the kitchen girl, the Omega with flour in her hair and a mouth that moved faster than her fear. He came back the next night because his wolf gave him no choice, and the night after that because he gave himself no choice, and on the third night, he stood in her kitchen and asked her name and watched her face go through 17 different expressions in 2 seconds, every single one of them a wall going up. Nora Ellis. He had looked her up. Of course he had. He was his father's son, and his father's son did not walk into anything without intelligence. The registry had almost nothing. No pack affiliation. No family record. She had appeared in the Ashwood system 6 years ago with a basic work permit and a kitchen assignment, and there was not a single note, commendation, complaint, or incident report attached to her file in all that time. 6 years of absolute invisibility. That, more than anything, told him something was wrong. Wolves did not go 6 years without a single documented interaction unless they were actively, skillfully, working to leave no trace. It was not neglect, it was craft. He brought this to his aide, a beta named Gregory, who had been managing Ethan's affairs since he was 16, and who had the particular talent of saying extremely alarming things in the tone of voice most people use to discuss weather. "There is a gap in the Omega registry," Gregory said, setting a tablet on Ethan's desk with the air of someone delivering a restaurant menu. 6 generations ago, a bloodline that was removed from the records by council order. The removal was thorough but not perfect. There are reference numbers that point to sealed files in the dark archive. Can you access them? Not without council authorization, which would alert the council that you are looking, which would raise questions you may not want raised 3 days before your gala. Ethan stared at the gap in the registry, a missing branch in the family tree of every Omega in Ashwood, pruned deliberately. "What was the bloodline known for?" he said. Gregory paused. This was unusual. Gregory did not pause. "The references I found use the old terminology. Bond seers. Wolves who could perceive true bonds between other wolves before those bonds manifested naturally." The room got very quiet. "That would be," Ethan said carefully, "extremely inconvenient for a council that has spent 200 years arranging strategic matings." "Yes, sir. It would be the kind of gift that someone in power would want to control, or eliminate." "Yes, sir." Ethan sat with that for a long time. He thought about Nora's hands in the bread dough. He thought about the way she flinched when his hand came near hers on the counter, not from fear of him, but from something older and deeper, a trained response that had nothing to do with the present moment. He thought about the way she talked, rapid and deflecting, every sentence a shield shaped like a joke. He thought about his wolf, silent and certain in her presence, and he understood something with the kind of clarity that only came at 3 in the morning, when the whole world was asleep and lying to yourself, took more energy than you had left. The pull he felt toward her was not random. It was not infatuation. It was not the desperation of a man facing a political mating he did not want. It was a bond, a real one, the kind the old texts described in language that sounded like mythology until it happened to you. He was bonded to an Omega with no bloodline, no status, no pack, and quite possibly the most dangerous gift in the wolf world. And the gala was in 2 days. Ethan did what his father had taught him to do when the situation was impossible. He made a plan. Then he made a second plan for when the first one failed. Then he made a third plan that he hoped he would never need, because the third plan involved burning down everything his family had built. He went to the kitchen that night, late. Later than usual, because he had spent hours in his study with Gregory, mapping contingencies and sealed records, and the particular geometry of a political system designed to keep wolves like Nora invisible. She was there, bread dough, flour dust. The spider under the oven had expanded its operations. "You put in a transfer request," he said. She did not look up. "Staff records are confidential." "Nothing in this compound is confidential from me." "Then you already know the answer to things you have not asked yet, and we can skip the part where I pretend I do not know why you keep showing up here." He sat on the counter. She looked at him for the first time that night, and her expression was the one he had seen on Cornered Animals. Not panic, but the cold, calculating stillness that came just before a decision about whether to fight or flee. "You can feel it," he said. "The bond." "I do not know what you are talking about." "You are a terrible liar, Nora." "I am an excellent liar. You just happen to be paying more attention than anyone has in 6 years." She set down the dough, Her hands were shaking. She folded them together and pressed them against her stomach, and he watched her swallow something that might have been fear, or anger, or the particular exhaustion that came from carrying a secret that was too heavy for one person. "If I could feel it," she said slowly, "if I hypothetically had any idea what you were talking about, the smart thing to do would be to tell you to walk away. Go back to your candidates. Pick one. Save your throne. Let me disappear to the mountain outpost, where no one will ever look at me twice. Is that what you want? What I want is irrelevant. What I want has been irrelevant since I was 17 years old." She said it flat. No self-pity. No drama. Just a fact, stated the way she might state the temperature of the oven, or the number of rolls needed for the second night reception. The flatness of it hit harder than any emotion could have. "What happened when you were 17, he said. Nora looked at him. Her eyes were brown, the kind of brown that looked simple until you got close enough to see the gold flecks in them. And right now, those eyes held something ancient and furious, and carefully contained. "My mother told the truth about someone's bond," she said. "The wrong someone. And then my mother was not there anymore." She picked up the dough again, started kneading. "I am not going to ask you what that means," Ethan said. "Good. But I need you to know something. Whatever you are hiding, whatever you think the council will do if they find out, I am not the council. I am not my father, and in approximately 48 hours, I am going to be standing on a dais making a choice that will define the next 100 years of this territory, and I need to make it with my eyes open." Nora's hands went still in the dough. "Your eyes are open," she said quietly. "That is the problem. Everyone else is asleep, and you are wide awake, and you are looking right at the one thing in this compound that you are not supposed to see." She pulled her hands from the dough and wiped them on her apron. "Go to bed, Ethan. Pick Charlotte. She is the only one of the four who will not try to control you, and her father has the smallest army, which means the least leverage. It is your best political option. You analyze the candidates. I analyze everything. It is a survival skill. And if I do not want the best political option..." Nora looked at him, and for one unguarded second, the shields dropped. He saw it. The longing she had been burying under flour and sarcasm, and 6 years of practiced invisibility. The bone-deep want of a wolf who had spent her entire adult life convinced that wanting things was a luxury she could not afford. Then the shields came back up, so fast he almost doubted what he had seen. "Then you are going to get us both killed," she said. She turned back to her bread. He left. But he did not go to bed, and he did not pick Charlotte, and in the morning, he called Gregory into his study and said 5 words that made his aide sit down without being invited for the first time in 10 years. "Get me the sealed files." Gregory looked at him for a long time. "This will start something that cannot be stopped," Gregory said. "I know. The council will know you accessed them within hours. I know. And the girl, if she is what I think she is, they will come for her." Ethan looked out the window at the Ironhold courtyard, where workers were constructing the gala stage, hanging banners, arranging flowers with the careful precision of people decorating a battlefield. "Then we had better move fast," he said. The gala was tomorrow. Gregory left to do what Gregory did best, which was move through systems like water through cracks, finding openings that were not supposed to exist, and flowing through them before anyone noticed the leak. Ethan sat in his study and waited, and while he waited, he thought about the architecture of lies. His father had built a kingdom on strategic matings. Every alliance, every territorial agreement, every trade route in Ashwood was anchored to a bonding that the council had engineered. Alpha to Omega, pack to pack, bloodline to bloodline, each one a link in a chain that held the wolf world together through politics rather than truth. It was elegant, it was effective, it was, Ethan was beginning to understand, built on a foundation of suppressed bonds and silenced seers and wolves, who went to their graves mated to the wrong person and never knowing why they ached. His father would call it governance. Nora's mother would have called it something else. Gregory returned in 2 hours. His face had the careful blankness of someone carrying information that could rearrange the world, and he set a single folder on Ethan's desk. Paper. Actual paper. The sealed files had been old enough that they predated the digital registry. Ethan opened the folder. The bloodline was called the Voss line. though it had been given different names in different eras: bond seers, truth carriers, the wolves who could perceive the invisible architecture of mate bonds and, in the oldest records, could even strengthen or sever them. For centuries, they had been revered, consulted before every mating, treated as sacred arbiters of connection. Then, the council rose to power, and the bond seers became a problem. A political system, built on arranged matings, could not survive wolves who could prove those matings were lies. The Voss line was quietly absorbed, diluted, scattered across the lower packs, where their gift would surface less frequently. When it did surface, the wolf in question was relocated, reassigned, removed from any position where they might encounter enough bonded pairs to understand what they were feeling. When relocation was not enough, the records simply stopped. Ethan read the last entry in the file 3 times. A woman named Helen Ellis, Omega Bondseer, identified and cataloged by council operatives 17 years ago after she revealed a suppressed bond in the Northern Pack that would have disrupted a territorial agreement worth millions in trade revenue. Status: relocated. Relocated was a word that could mean a lot of things. It could mean a cottage in the mountains and a quiet life. It could mean a shallow grave and a daughter who grew up learning that the truth was something you kept locked behind your teeth no matter how loud it hummed. Ethan closed the folder. He looked at the gala stage being assembled outside his window, the banners snapping in the wind, the 4 Omega candidates rehearsing their approach to the dais with their handlers correcting every step, every angle, every tilt of their chin, a choreography of false bonds being prepared for public display while the real one sat in a kitchen 3 floors below, kneading bread and trying to make herself small enough to disappear. His wolf stirred for the first time in days, not restless, not pacing, ready. Ethan picked up his phone and called the one person in the compound he trusted completely. "I need a favor," he said, "and you are going to hate it." On the other end of the line, his younger sister Lily said, "I already hate it. What do you need?" "I need you to make sure Nora Ellis is on the floor during the gala, not in the kitchen, on the floor, serving the 3rd course." "Who is Nora Ellis?" "She is the reason I am about to set fire to everything Dad built." A long pause. "Finally," Lily said, and hung up. The Bonding Gala opened with a howl. Not a wolf howl, a ceremonial horn, carved from the bone of some ancient creature that no one alive could identify, blown by the eldest member of the council, with a lung capacity that defied his 93 years on the planet. The sound rolled through the iron-hulled Great Hall like a living thing, bouncing off the vaulted stone ceiling and rattling the crystal chandeliers that someone had spent 3 days polishing into weapons-grade sparkle. 300 wolves filled the hall, dressed in formal black. Seated at long tables, arranged in concentric arcs around the central dais, which rose 3 steps above the floor and was draped in the deep green of the Ashwood crest. Candles everywhere, real ones, not electric, because the council believed that tradition was measured in fire hazards. The Elder Council occupied a crescent of carved stone chairs along the north wall. 7 old wolves in ceremonial robes, their faces set in expressions that had been practiced over decades of sitting in judgment over things they did not fully understand. They looked carved themselves. Granite men in a granite room, and the weight of their collective disapproval could flatten a lesser wolf at 50 paces. At the center of the dais, in a throne that seemed designed to swallow whoever sat in it, Alpha King Henry Cole presided over his last public ceremony. He was thin. Thinner than the last time the court had seen him, which had been 3 months ago, and the gasps when he entered had been quickly smothered but not quickly enough. His hands shook on the armrests. His eyes, which had once held the kind of authority that could silence a room by blinking, were clouded and distant. But he was here. He had refused the wheelchair. He had refused the oxygen. He had dressed himself, according to the whispers of his attendants, by locking the door and spending 45 minutes fighting buttons with fingers that would not cooperate, because the Alpha King of Ashwood did not have help getting dressed. Not on the night his son chose a mate. Not ever. Ethan stood at the base of the dais in black, and the entire hall watched him the way an audience watches a tightrope walker who is halfway across and has just noticed the wind picking up. He looked calm. This was a lie he had been practicing since he was 14. The art of making his face agree to terms his body had not negotiated. Inside, his wolf was doing something new. It was not still anymore. It was not pacing. It was pointing. Like a compass needle, locked on true north, toward the service corridor, on the east side of the hall, where the kitchen staff moved in practiced silence, carrying trays and filling glasses, and performing the ancient choreography of not being seen. The first candidate approached the dais. Margaret Ashworth walked the ceremonial path with the precision of someone who had rehearsed this moment in front of a mirror for a month. Her dress was ivory, her hair was architectural. She extended her hand, palm up, in the traditional offering, and recited the old words in a voice that carried perfectly to every corner of the hall. I offer my hand and my bond to the heir of Ashwood, in the sight of the council and the old blood. Ethan looked at her hand. He looked at her face. He saw intelligence, ambition, a carefully constructed warmth that would have convinced anyone who was not looking for the gears turning behind it. His wolf did not move. I honor your offering, Ethan said, using the formal refusal that the old language provided. But the bond does not speak. The hall murmured. A refusal in the first round was unusual, but not unheard of. Margaret's face did not change, which was itself a kind of answer. She had prepared for this possibility. She stepped back to her position with the composed grace of someone who had lost the battle but not the war. Diana Price was next. She did not walk the ceremonial path. She strode it, and the difference was the difference between a diplomat and a general. Her dress was midnight blue, cut to move with her rather than constrain her, and when she extended her hand, it was not an offering, it was a challenge. I offer my hand and my bond to the heir of Ashwood, she said, and her voice had edges. Ethan met her eyes. Diana's wolf pressed against the room, and he felt it, the strength of her, the ambition that was not hidden behind warmth, but worn openly like armor. She would be a formidable queen. She would also, he understood, spend every day of their bonding testing the boundaries of his authority. His wolf did not move. I honor your offering, but the bond does not speak. The murmur became a rumble. 2 refusals. The council members exchanged glances that carried the weight of entire political strategies being recalculated in real time. Diana's jaw tightened. She did not step back gracefully. She stepped back like someone filing the moment away for future reference. Sophie Lane approached third. She was the youngest, and she used it. Where Margaret was composed and Diana was fierce, Sophie was soft, and her softness was a weapon so finely crafted that most wolves never saw the blade beneath it. She smiled as she walked, and her smile was the kind that made you want to protect her, to shield her, to believe that her vulnerability was genuine rather than strategic. She extended her hand. I offer my hand and my bond to the heir of Ashwood. Her voice was gentle, almost intimate. She leaned forward slightly as she spoke, and the lean was calculated to create the impression of a private moment in a public space. Ethan looked at her and saw the calculation, and behind the calculation, he saw something that almost changed his mind. A flicker of real loneliness. Not performed, not strategic. The genuine isolation of a young woman who had been raised as a political instrument and had never been asked what she actually wanted. His wolf did not move. I honor your offering, but the bond does not speak. Sophie's mask cracked, just for a second. Then it reassembled, and she stepped back with her chin high and her eyes bright, with something she would never let anyone see long enough to name. The rumble in the hall had become a roar held behind 300 sets of clenched teeth, 3 refusals. In the recorded history of the Bonding Gala, the most refusals before a selection had been 2, and that was 400 years ago and had nearly caused a civil war. Charlotte Vane stepped up last. She did not walk the ceremonial path. She did not stride it. She strolled, with the loose-limbed ease of someone who had shown up to a state funeral in sneakers and did not care who noticed. Her dress was red in a hall full of dark, formal colors, and it was not a political statement, because Charlotte Vane did not make political statements. She made Charlotte Vane statements, and the difference was that no one could predict what they meant until it was too late. She stopped at the base of the dais and looked at Ethan with an expression that contained absolutely zero ceremony. I offer my hand and my bond, she said, skipping half the formal language with the casual confidence of someone who had read the script and decided it was too long. You are going to say no. The hall went dead silent. I am going to say no, Ethan agreed. Charlotte nodded. Good. I was going to refuse you if you said yes, and I would rather we skip the part where everyone pretends to be shocked. She did not wait for his formal refusal. She turned and walked back to her position, and the red of her dress cut through the dark hall like a blade. 4 refusals. The silence that followed was not the polite silence of a social moment being processed. It was the dense, pressurized silence of a system reaching its breaking point, the silence of 300 wolves, understanding simultaneously that the script they had all agreed to follow had just been shredded. Alpha King Henry leaned forward in his throne. The movement cost him. Nora could see it from the service corridor, the way his arms trembled as he pushed himself upright, the way his jaw locked against the pain that must have been running through every failing cell in his body. "You will choose," he said. His voice carried. Thin, stripped of the power it had once held, but carrying on the authority of 30 years of unchallenged rule. It was not a suggestion. It was not a request. It was the last command of a king who had staked everything on this night and was watching his legacy unravel in real time. Ethan looked at his father. Nora watched from behind the pass-through window, her hands wrapped around a soup tureen she had been holding for 7 minutes without realizing she had stopped moving. The hum in her teeth was so loud now that she could feel it in her skull, in her fingertips, in the soles of her feet on the cold kitchen floor. Every bond in the hall was vibrating, 300 invisible threads trembling in response to the rupture happening on the dais, as if the entire room's hidden architecture was resonating with the shock. She should not be here. Clara, the head cook, had burned her hand on the soup vat 40 minutes before service, and someone needed to manage the third-course delivery, and that someone, by the kind of coincidence that Nora did not believe in but could not disprove, was Nora. She had stepped onto the hall floor for exactly 90 seconds to set the tureen on a serving station near the east wall, and then the horn had blown and the ceremony had started, and she had frozen in the service corridor with her hands on the tureen and her exit blocked by the ceremonial guard who had sealed the hall doors. She was trapped, visible, standing in the one place in the compound where she had sworn she would never be seen. And Ethan was looking for her. She could feel it before she saw it. His attention sweeping the hall, passing over the dais, the candidates, the council, the tables of formal guests, searching for something the way a compass needle seeks magnetic north. Not frantic, not obvious. A slow, deliberate scan that anyone watching would mistake for a man surveying his court. Nora knew better. She could feel the bond pulling taut between them like a wire, humming at a frequency that only she could hear, and she understood with perfect, horrifying clarity what he was about to do. She tried to move. Her feet would not cooperate. Her hands would not release the tureen. Her body had made a decision that her brain had not been consulted on, and the decision was to stand exactly where she was and wait for the impact. Ethan's eyes found her. The moment locked into place like a key turning in a lock that had been waiting for centuries. Across the hall, through the candlelight and the silence and the 300 wolves holding their breath, the heir to the Alpha King's throne looked directly at a kitchen girl standing in a service corridor with flour on her sleeve and a soup tureen she had forgotten she was holding. He stepped off the dais. The hall did not gasp. Gasping would have required the ability to breathe, and 300 wolves had simultaneously forgotten how. Ethan walked down the 3 steps of the dais, past the 4 candidates, past the elder council in their carved stone chairs, past his dying father whose eyes had gone sharp for the first time in months, and crossed the great hall floor in a straight line that pointed to the east service corridor like an arrow fired from a bow. He stopped in front of Nora. She looked up at him. The soup tureen sat between them like a chaperone. "You cannot do this," she whispered. "I am already doing it. The council will tear you apart. Let them try. Your father is watching. Good. He should see this." He extended his hand, palm up, the traditional offering, reversed. In the old language, in the old rituals, it was always the Omega who offered and the Alpha who accepted. For the Alpha to offer was something else entirely. It was not a selection, it was a petition, a request made from strength, to something the offerer recognized as greater than strength. 300 wolves stared at the heir's open hand, extended toward a girl none of them had ever seen before, and the silence in the hall had a weight to it, dense and fragile, and one wrong breath from shattering into something no one could put back together. Nora looked at his hand. She looked at his face. She looked past him, toward the dais where his father sat with an expression she could not read from this distance, and toward the council, whose expressions she could read perfectly because they were wearing the same one, a cold, calculating fury that was already building plans behind their eyes. She set down the soup tureen. She took his hand. The contact was electric. Not metaphorically, not poetically. Literally electric, a current that jumped from his skin to hers and ran through her arm and into her chest, and every bond in the room detonated. Not broke, not dissolved. Detonated, like signal flares going off one after another, a chain reaction of invisible connections suddenly becoming visible to the one person in the room who could feel them all. Nora gasped. Her knees buckled. Ethan caught her arm with his free hand, steady, sure, and the contact doubled the sensation, tripled it, and for 3 seconds she could feel every true bond in the great hall simultaneously. 47 of them. 47 invisible threads connecting wolves who were seated at different tables, mated to different people, living different lives, and every single thread was singing. She could hear them, not with her ears, with something older and deeper, the gift she had spent 6 years suffocating, roaring to life in her like a furnace door thrown open. She forced herself upright, forced her eyes to focus, forced the roaring down to a manageable hum, by sheer will and the particular stubbornness that had kept her alive and invisible for this long. Ethan was watching her face. He had felt something too. She could see it in his eyes, a widening that had nothing to do with surprise and everything to do with confirmation. He knew. He did not know the details, did not know the scope, but he knew that what had just happened, when they touched, was not a normal bond response. Nora, he said. Just her name. Quiet enough that only she could hear it. She looked up at him, and in her eyes, he could see the war she was fighting. The part of her that wanted to run, to disappear, to become the ghost she had trained herself to be, and the part of her that was tired, so desperately tired of hiding, that the prospect of being seen, even if it destroyed her, felt like the first full breath she had taken in 6 years. The tired part won. Nora did the thing that no one in the hall expected. Not Ethan, not the council, not the dying king who had built his reign on the certainty that he understood how power worked. She knelt. Not the way an omega was supposed to kneel. The traditional kneel was a bow, a folding, a making small. Nora dropped to one knee with her back straight and her chin up, and she pulled Ethan's hand down with her, so he had to bend at the waist to keep hold of it. And in doing so, she turned the gesture inside out. She was not kneeling to him. She was pulling him down to her level, and the difference was visible to every wolf in the hall who understood body language, which was all of them. 300 wolves watched the Omega pull the Alpha Heir down, and the symbolism hit the room like a shockwave. She whispered. 7 words, spoken into the space between his jaw and his ear, quiet enough that not even the wolves in the front row with their heightened hearing could catch them. I know where all the real bonds are. 7 words. 7 syllables that carried the weight of 200 years of suppressed truth, of a bloodline erased from the registry, of a mother who vanished because she spoke one bond into existence, and of a daughter who had counted every hidden connection in this hall and understood exactly what that knowledge meant. It was not a confession, it was not a declaration, it was a weapon, handed willingly to the one wolf with enough power to use it. Ethan's face changed. The color left it first, a draining, like water pulled from sand, fast and total. Then it came back, all at once, a flush that started at his collar and climbed, and his eyes, when he straightened, held something that made the wolves nearest to the dais take an involuntary step backward. Not anger, not fear, recognition. The look of a man who had just been handed the key to every locked door in a building he owned, and had never been allowed to fully enter. He straightened to his full height. Nora stayed on one knee, looking up at him, and her expression was a dare, not defiant, not aggressive. A dare of the quieter kind, the kind that said, I have shown you what I am, and now you get to decide what that means. Ethan turned to face the hall. This is my mate, he said. His voice filled the room the way his father's voice used to fill it, with the weight of someone who was not asking for agreement. And anyone who challenges her stands against me. The hall erupted. Not into chaos, into something worse. Controlled fury, the kind that wore formal clothes and used parliamentary language and could do more damage than any fist or claw. The Elder Council was on its feet, 7 old wolves moving with a speed that belied their age, their voices rising in a chorus of procedural objections and invocations of ancient law, and the particular high-pitched outrage of men who have just watched the board get flipped on a game they thought they had rigged. Margaret Ashworth's father was striding toward the dais with murder dressed up as diplomacy on his face. Diana Price had not moved from her position, but her eyes were doing calculations that would have terrified a military strategist. Sophie Lane had gone very still and very pale, and was watching Nora with an intensity that had nothing to do with jealousy, and everything to do with the slow, terrible recognition of a wolf who has just felt something shift in her own chest. Charlotte Vane leaned against a pillar in her red dress and watched the chaos unfold with the expression of someone who had known this was going to happen and had worn red specifically so she would be easy to spot in the aftermath. And on the throne, Alpha King Henry Cole gripped the armrests with hands that had stopped shaking for the first time in weeks, and he looked at his son with an expression that contained multitudes. Fury, yes. Betrayal, certainly. The particular heartbreak of a father watching his child take a hammer to everything he had built. But underneath all of it, buried so deep that only someone standing very close would have seen it, there was something else. Relief. The relief of a man who had spent 30 years maintaining a lie and had just watched someone finally, irreversibly, refuse to keep telling it. Nora rose from her knee. Her hand was still in Ethan's. Around them, the hall churned with the sound of an old world cracking, and the new one had not yet decided what shape it wanted to take. She looked up at Ethan. He looked down at her. Neither of them spoke. They did not need to. The bond between them was wide open now, humming at a frequency that filled Nora's entire body with a warmth she had never felt before. The warmth of being seen exactly as she was, and not flinching from what looked back. She did not know what would happen next. The council would come for her. The Great Pack Fathers would demand retribution. The political order that held the wolf world together was going to tear itself apart over what had just happened on this floor. But for this one moment, standing in the wreckage of a ceremony that had been designed to keep wolves like her invisible, holding the hand of a wolf who had chosen her over an empire, Nora Ellis was not hiding. For the first time in 6 years, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They moved her within the hour. 2 guards flanked Nora as she walked from the great hall through corridors she had only ever seen from the service side, through doors she had spent 6 years entering sideways with trays balanced on her forearms, past wolves who had never once looked at her face, and were now staring at it like they were trying to memorize the features of the person who had just demolished their entire political reality. Ethan walked ahead of her, not beside her, ahead, cutting a path through the compound, with the focused energy of someone who knew that the gap between the explosion and the response was measured in minutes, not hours. Gregory appeared at his elbow, materializing from a side corridor with a tablet, and the expression of someone who had already been making contingency plans for 3 hours. "Council is convening in the West Chamber," Gregory said. "Elder Philip has invoked the verification protocol. They want her bloodline confirmed before sunrise. They want to find a reason to disqualify her," Ethan said. "Yes. What will they find?" Gregory glanced back at Nora, who was walking between the 2 guards with her hands clasped in front of her and flour still dusting her left sleeve. She looked, to anyone who did not know better, like a woman being escorted to a holding cell. She did not look frightened. She looked like someone who had made a decision and was now living inside the consequences. "They will find the sealed files," Gregory said. "The ones you accessed this morning. They will know you saw them first." "Good. Let them know I knew what I was choosing." They reached the heir's wing. The guards took positions outside the door. Ethan turned to face Nora for the first time since the hall, and the look on his face was something she had not seen before. Not the controlled calm, not the almost smile, something raw and uncertain and entirely human. "Are you all right?" he said. "I have flour on my sleeve at the most important political event in a generation, and I just knelt on a stone floor in front of 300 wolves who now know my face. I am spectacular." He almost smiled. This time, it got all the way to his eyes before his face could catch it. "They are going to come for you," he said. "The council. They will use the verification protocol to delay the bond recognition. They will investigate your bloodline. They will find your mother's records." I know. And when they find out what you can do, they will either try to control you or try to remove you. I know that too. Ethan stepped closer, close enough that Nora could feel the bond humming between them at a frequency that made her teeth ache in the old, familiar way, except it was not painful anymore. It was warm. It was the warmth of a wall that catches you instead of blocking you, and she hated that she had thought of that metaphor, because it was sentimental, and she was not sentimental. She was practical. She was a survivor. She was a woman who baked bread at 2 in the morning, because bread was predictable, and bread did not rearrange your entire existence by extending its hand in a crowded hall. I will not let them touch you, Ethan said. You cannot promise that. I am the Alpha King's heir, and the Alpha King is dying, and the Council has been running this territory from behind his throne for 3 years, and the Great Pack Fathers have armies and trade agreements and 2 centuries of investment in the system you just set fire to. You are one wolf, Ethan. I am one wolf with the truth. The truth has never protected anyone in my family. She said it flat. She said it the way she said everything that mattered, without decoration, without drama, without the emotional padding that other people use to soften the edges of terrible facts. Her mother had known the truth. Her mother had spoken the truth. Her mother was gone. Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Your mother, he said carefully. Helen Ellis. Nora went very still. Gregory found the sealed files, Ethan said. I read them this morning. I know what the Council did to the Voss line. I know your mother was a bond seer. I know she was removed from the registry 17 years ago, after she revealed a suppressed bond in the Northern Pack. Removed, Nora said. The word sat in the air between them like a stone dropped into still water. The file says relocated. The file says whatever the Council wanted it to say. Do you know where she is? Nora looked at him. Her eyes were dry and her face was composed and her voice was steady, and all of those things were walls, and Ethan could see the walls and the thing they were holding back, which was a grief so old and so deep that it had become structural. Remove it, and she would collapse. So she kept it in place and built around it and lived her life on top of it like a house built on a fault line. No, she said. I do not know where she is. I stopped looking 4 years ago, because every trail led to a locked file, and every locked file led to the Council, and every approach to the Council led to someone asking questions about why a kitchen girl was interested in sealed records. I will find her. Do not promise me things you cannot deliver. I am promising things I will deliver. There is a difference. She looked at him for a long time, and something shifted behind her eyes. Not trust, not yet. But the possibility of trust, a door left slightly open that had been welded shut for years. A knock at the door. Gregory entered without waiting, which meant the situation had escalated past the point of social niceties. The Council has accelerated the verification protocol, he said. They are demanding Nora submit to a blood test within the hour. Elder Philip is citing the purity statutes. The purity statutes were repealed 40 years ago, Ethan said. Elder Philip is arguing they were never formally removed from the charter. They were repealed by my grandfather. Your grandfather did not file the proper documentation, apparently, according to Elder Philip, who has had 40 years to prepare for this exact scenario. The room got very quiet. They knew, Nora said. Both men looked at her. The Council. They knew this was possible. They knew a bond seer could surface again. They kept the purity statutes in reserve, unfiled, incomplete, so they could pull them out if they ever needed to disqualify someone like me. She said it with the calm clarity of someone who had spent 6 years studying the machinery of the system that had consumed her mother, learning its gears and levers and pressure points, not because she planned to fight it, but because she needed to understand the shape of the thing that might one day come for her too. They have been preparing for you, Ethan said. Not for me. For anyone like me. I am not special. I am a category. A threat class. They have protocols for threats. Gregory set his tablet on the table. The blood test will confirm the Voss markers. Once confirmed, the Council will invoke the heritage restriction, which bars wolves of restricted bloodlines from bonding into the royal line. A law designed to keep bond seers away from power, Ethan said. Precisely. Ethan turned to Nora. Can you refuse the test? Not without giving them grounds for detention. An Omega who refuses a Council-ordered verification can be held in the compound indefinitely pending investigation. You know the laws. I know the laws, the way a prisoner knows the walls. By touch. By measurement. By counting the steps between one locked door and the next. Ethan moved to the window. The gala was dissolving below. Guests were streaming from the great hall in clusters, and the sound of 300 simultaneous conversations rose through the courtyard like heat shimmer. He could see Margaret Ashworth's father in a tight knot with 2 council members, their heads together, their hands moving in the sharp gestures of men assembling strategy from wreckage. Something was happening in the compound that none of them had planned for. Wolves were stopping in the corridors, in the courtyard, at the gates, stopping and looking at each other with expressions of confusion and wonder, and the particular disorientation of someone who has just felt something shift inside their chest that they cannot name. The bonds were waking up. Nora felt it before anyone explained it. Standing in the Heir's wing, 3 floors above the courtyard, she felt the hum in her teeth change frequency. It was louder, richer, layered, like a chord being built one note at a time. The touch in the great hall, the moment her hand had met Ethan's, had done something. Her gift, suppressed for 6 years, locked behind walls of silence and bread dough, and practiced invisibility, had been blown open. And it was spreading. Not her gift itself, the bonds. The true bonds that the council had spent 2 centuries suppressing, rearranging, burying under strategic matings and political alliances. They were surfacing. Wolves who had never felt a pull toward their true mate were feeling it now, a hum in their own chests, faint and confusing and undeniable. Something is happening, Nora said. Ethan turned from the window. What do you mean? The bonds. I can feel them. They are waking up. Not just the ones that were already there. New ones. Or old ones that were buried so deep they had gone dormant. Dozens of them. In this compound, right now. She pressed her hands against her temples. The hum was becoming a roar, and the roar was becoming a symphony, and the symphony was the sound of a system built on lies, beginning to vibrate at a frequency it could not sustain. Dozens, Ethan repeated. 47, at least. I can feel 47 true bonds in this compound, and most of them connect wolves who are mated to someone else. The number hung in the air. 47. Wrong matings. 47 political alliances built on the suppression of real connections. 47 wolves living lives that the council had designed for them, married to partners they had been assigned, while their true bonds sat dormant and aching in their bones. Ethan looked at Gregory. Gregory looked at the tablet. The tablet had no answers for this. This changes everything, Ethan said. This was always everything, Nora said. You just could not see it until now. She sat on the edge of the bed in the Heir's wing, in a room that was larger than the kitchen she had lived in for 6 years, and she pressed her palms flat against her knees to stop them from shaking. Not from fear, from the strain of holding open a gift that had been forced shut for so long that opening it felt like prying apart rusted metal with her bare hands. I need to write them down, she said. Write what down? The bonds. All of them. Every true bond in this compound. Names, connections, who belongs with whom. I need to get it out of my head and onto paper before the council takes me for their blood test. Because once they confirm what I am, they will not let me near another wolf until they have figured out how to use me or how to make me disappear. Ethan handed her a pen and a notebook. Nora began to write. Her handwriting was small and precise, the handwriting of someone who had spent years compressing important things into the smallest possible space. She wrote names in pairs connected by dashes, and beside each pair she noted the current status: mated elsewhere, unbonded, separated by assignment, deceased partner, bond still active. Ethan watched her write. He did not interrupt. He did not ask questions. He stood by the window and guarded the silence the way his instincts told him to, creating the space she needed to do something she had never allowed herself to do before. She filled 4 pages, then she stopped, set the pen down, and flexed her fingers. 47, she said. 47 true bonds. 12 of them are between wolves who are currently mated to other people. 8 are between wolves from rival packs who have never been allowed to meet. 3 involve wolves in the Elder Council's direct bloodline. 3 council bloodlines. Yes, including Elder Philip's grandson, who is bonded to an Omega from the Western Pack, who was deliberately relocated to the southern border 6 years ago. Philip's grandson? Philip knows. He has always known. That is why he wants me tested. That is why the purity statutes were never properly filed. Philip has been running a suppression operation inside the council for 2 decades, and I am the first wolf in 6 generations who can prove it. The room settled into the kind of silence that precedes earthquakes. The slow, pressurized quiet of tectonic plates deciding whether to hold or to slip. He will come for this list, Nora said. She touched the notebook with her fingertips. If he knows what I am, he will know that I can compile it. This list is more dangerous than I am. I am one wolf. This list is proof that the entire bonding system is compromised. Then we need to use it before he gets the chance. Use it how? Walk into the council chamber and announce that half the territory's political marriages are built on suppressed bonds? They will call me a fraud, detain me for psychological evaluation, and destroy the list before it sees daylight. Not if we do it publicly. Nora looked at him. The gala is not over, Ethan said. The bonding ceremony was interrupted, not concluded. By tradition, the ceremony must be formally closed by the Alpha King, and my father has not closed it. Every wolf in attendance is still bound by ceremonial protocol to remain in the compound until the closing rites. You want to use the closing rites. I want you to present the list during the closing rites, in the Great Hall, in front of every witness, where the council cannot bury it, cannot detain you, and cannot pretend it does not exist. Nora stared at him. That is either the bravest plan I have ever heard, or the most reckless. It is both. Most good plans are. And if your father refuses to reopen the ceremony? My father is dying. He has been dying for months, and the one thing he has wanted more than anything is to see the succession secured before he goes. If I walk into his chamber and tell him I have found my true mate, and I have proof that the council has been lying to him for 30 years, he will listen. He will be furious, but he will listen, because my father is many things, but he has never been a man who chose comfortable lies over painful truths. You are betting everything on that. I am betting everything on you. The words landed in the room and stayed there. Not dramatic, not grand, just honest in the plain and slightly terrifying way that honesty sounds when it is not trying to impress anyone. Nora picked up the notebook. She held it against her chest, 4 pages of cramped handwriting that contained enough truth to rebuild or destroy the wolf world's political order. I need to tell you something, she said, about the 7 words. Ethan waited. When I said I know where all the real bonds are, I was not being metaphorical. I was not giving you a general statement of ability. I was telling you a specific, countable fact. I know where they are, all of them, not just in this compound. Everywhere I have been, every wolf I have stood near, every bond I have felt hum in my teeth for the last 6 years, I have been counting them, cataloging them, remembering every single one. She tapped the notebook. This is not my only list. This is the list for tonight. The full catalog is in my head, and it covers every wolf I have encountered since I was 17 years old. Ethan's face did something complicated. She watched the understanding move through him like weather, the realization of exactly how large this was, how much further it reached than a single gala night, how deep the fault lines ran. How many? He said. Hundreds. I do not have an exact count. Some are faint, dormant, connections between wolves who have never met and might never meet. But the active ones, the ones I could write down right now, with names and locations and confidence, over 200. The number filled the room. And the council has been suppressing all of them, Ethan said. It was not a question. Not all. Some they never knew about. Some faded naturally when the wolves were separated for long enough. But the deliberate suppressions, the ones where the council actively intervened to keep bonded wolves apart or to mate them with someone else for political reasons, those I can identify. The bond carries a mark, a distortion, like a bruise on the thread. I can feel the difference between a bond that faded and a bond that was forced apart. You can prove intent. I can prove pattern. Intent is what the evidence implies. Ethan reached for his phone, called Gregory. 2 words, get Lily. Then he turned back to Nora. We do this tonight, before Philip can invoke the purity statutes. Before the council convenes in the morning, we go to my father, we present the list, and we demand the closing rites be held in full ceremony with every wolf in attendance. And then I walk into a hall full of wolves who want me gone, and I tell them their entire world is a lie. Yes? Nora looked at the notebook. She looked at the door. She looked at the window, where the courtyard below was still churning with wolves who were feeling things they could not explain. My mother did this, she said quietly. She told the truth. One truth, one bond, and she disappeared. Your mother was alone. You are not. Nora met his eyes. The bond between them hummed, steady and warm, a frequency she had spent 6 years running from, and had found in the last 12 hours that she no longer wanted to escape. All right, she said. Let us go talk to the king. The Alpha King's chamber smelled like medicine and old wood, and the particular staleness of a room where someone had been dying slowly enough for the air itself to give up. Henry Cole sat in a chair by the window, not the throne-like monstrosity in the great hall, but a simple wooden chair with a worn cushion, the kind of chair that a man chose when he was tired of performing and just wanted something honest under him. His attendants had been dismissed. The oxygen tank sat in the corner, unused, a concession to vanity that his lungs were quietly punishing him for. He looked at his son. He looked at the girl beside his son. He looked at the notebook in the girl's hands. You have 30 seconds to explain why I should not have the guards drag you both out of here, he said, and his voice, stripped of the ceremonial amplification of the great hall, was thin and rough, and carried the particular exhaustion of a man who had spent his last reserves of strength on a ceremony that had gone sideways in a way he had not imagined possible. You have been lied to, Ethan said. For 30 years, by the council, you trusted to manage the bonding system. Everyone lies to kings. Be specific. Nora is a bond seer, the last of the Voss line. She can feel true bonds between wolves, and she has identified 47 suppressed bonds in this compound alone. The council has been systematically preventing true mates from finding each other and replacing real bonds with political arrangements. Henry was quiet for a long time. The only sound was his breathing, labored and uneven, and the distant murmur of the compound below, where 300 wolves were still processing the evening's events. Sit down, he said finally. They sat. On the floor, because the only other chair was across the room, and neither of them wanted to break the moment by going to get it. They sat on the floor of the Alpha King's chamber, like children called to account, and Henry looked down at them with an expression that was peeling itself apart in layers. The Voss line, he said. I remember the name. My father mentioned it once. He said they were trouble. They were truth, Nora said. Your father called it trouble because truth was inconvenient for the system he was building. Henry's eyes sharpened on her. You are not afraid of me. I am afraid of everything, Your Majesty, but I am more afraid of what happens if I stay quiet than what happens if I speak. Your mother said something similar, I am told. The room went very still. You knew about my mother, Nora said, and her voice had edges that had not been there a second ago. I knew she existed. I knew she was identified and removed. I did not know the details. The council handled it. They handle many things. That is what councils do. They handle things. My mother was handled. Henry met her eyes, and in the space between two dying breaths, something passed between the Alpha King and the kitchen girl that had nothing to do with rank or power or the elaborate hierarchy that defined their world. It was recognition. The recognition of two people who had both spent their lives inside systems that demanded silence as the price of survival. I am dying, Henry said. I have perhaps 3 weeks, perhaps less. The healers are being optimistic because healers are paid to be optimistic, and pessimism does not make for good bedside manner. In 3 weeks, my son will take the throne, and the council will either support him or destroy him, and the choice they make will depend entirely on whether he gives them a reason to believe the old order can survive. He looked at the notebook. What is in there gives them a reason to believe it cannot. It gives them a reason to change, Ethan said. Change and destruction look the same to old men sitting in stone chairs. Then let them see it in public. Let every wolf in the compound see the list. Let the evidence speak in a room where it cannot be buried or dismissed or handled. Henry closed his eyes. For a moment, Nora thought he had fallen asleep, or worse, that the effort of this conversation had pushed his body past its limits. His breathing went shallow. His hands, folded in his lap, trembled with a fine, constant vibration that spoke of muscles losing their last argument with gravity. Then he opened his eyes, and they were clear. "I will reopen the ceremony," he said. "I will call the closing rites for midnight. Every wolf in attendance will be required to remain, per tradition. You will have the floor." He looked at Nora. "And you will have approximately 4 minutes before the council moves to shut you down. Whatever you need to say it fast." Nora nodded. "One condition," Henry said. "When this is over, whatever happens, you find out what happened to your mother. Use the resources of the crown if you have to, but find out. Because if the council removed her on my watch, under my authority, using my name, then I owe her a debt that dying does not erase." Nora's hands tightened on the notebook. Something moved behind her eyes, fast and liquid, and she blinked it away before it could become anything visible. "Thank you," she said. "Do not thank me. I am giving you a stage, not a shield. What you do on it is your problem." They left the king's chamber at 11:15. The closing rites were called for midnight. 45 minutes to prepare for the moment that would either crack open 2 centuries of political architecture or get them both thrown in the compound's detention cells. Gregory was waiting in the corridor with Lily, Ethan's younger sister, who was 21 and had the particular energy of someone who had been waiting her entire life for something to go dramatically wrong so she could be useful. She was small, sharp-featured, and carried herself with the compressed intensity of a spring that had been wound tight and was looking forward to the release. "Tell me everything," Lily said. "Leave nothing out. I have already heard 6 different versions from 6 different wolves, and none of them agree on anything except that my brother lost his mind in public." "Your brother found his mind in public," Nora said. "It just does not look the way people expected." Lily looked at her, then she looked at Ethan, then she looked back at Nora and smiled a smile that was half approval and half the delight of someone who has just found a co-conspirator. "I like her," Lily told Ethan. "If the council does not kill her, keep her." They moved through the compound toward the Great Hall. Gregory was on his phone, coordinating with the ceremonial staff, ensuring that the closing rites would proceed with full formal protocol. Every wolf in attendance had been notified. The hall was being prepared. The council had been informed, and Gregory reported that Elder Philip's response to the notification had been a silence so complete and so prolonged that his aide had checked to make sure he was still breathing. The Great Hall at midnight was a different creature than the Great Hall at the gala's peak. The candles had burned down to stubs, casting a lower, warmer light that made the stone walls look alive. The guests had returned, but the formal seating arrangement had dissolved. Wolves sat where they wanted, stood where they could, clustered in groups that had nothing to do with pack affiliation and everything to do with the frantic recalculations of a political class caught mid-earthquake. The Elder Council was in position. 7 stone chairs, 7 old wolves. Philip at the center, and Philip's face was a masterpiece of controlled nothing, the blankest canvas Nora had ever seen, and the blankness was itself a message. He knew what she was, and he knew what she was about to do, and the nothing on his face was the nothing of a man who had already decided on his countermove, and was simply waiting for the opportunity to deploy it. Alpha King Henry entered the hall last. He walked, slowly, painfully, with a hand on the doorframe, and then a hand on the back of a chair, and then nothing, just his own failing body carrying him to the dais with a dignity that made 300 wolves go silent out of something deeper than respect. He did not sit on the throne. He stood beside it, one hand on its arm for balance, and he looked out at the hall with the eyes of a man, seeing his kingdom clearly for the first time, or perhaps the last. "The closing rites of the Bonding Gala are called," he said. "The ceremony is reopened. The heir has a statement." He stepped aside. Ethan climbed the dais. 300 wolves watched. The council watched. Philip watched with his careful, nothing face. "Tonight I chose my mate," Ethan said. "The council has questioned this choice. They will invoke protocols and statutes and procedural objections designed to prevent this bond from being recognized. They are within their rights. But before they do, you deserve to hear something. Not from me, from her." He looked at Nora. She stood at the base of the dais, small, flowers still on her sleeve, the notebook in her hands. Around her, 300 wolves who had never seen her face before tonight, who did not know her name, who would decide in the next 4 minutes whether she was a fraud or a revelation. She climbed the 3 steps. She did not look at the council. She did not look at Ethan. She looked at the hall, at the faces, at the wolves who were watching her, with curiosity and hostility, and the particular hunger of people who sense that they are about to hear something that cannot be unheard. "My name is Nora Ellis," she said. "6 years ago, I came to this compound with nothing. No pack, no family, no bloodline the registry would acknowledge. I have spent those 6 years in your kitchens, baking your bread and staying out of your way, and not one of you has ever looked at me twice." She opened the notebook. "I am a bond seer, the last of the Voss line. I can feel the true bonds between wolves, the real connections that exist beneath the matings. The council arranged for you. And tonight, I am going to tell you something that the council has spent 200 years making sure you never heard." She looked at Philip. His nothing face held. "Some of you are mated to the wrong wolves. Not by accident, by design. The council identified your true bonds and suppressed them because those bonds would have disrupted political alliances or territorial agreements, or the careful architecture of power that keeps certain families in control and certain bloodlines in the shadows." The hall was silent, not the dramatic silence of a reveal, the stunned silence of a crowd trying to process information that contradicts everything they have been told about how their world works. "I have a list," Nora said. 47 true bonds in this compound. Some of you are sitting next to your real mate right now and do not know it. Some of you are sitting across the room from the wolf you were meant for, and the ache you have felt your entire life, the one you could never name, the one you thought was just what life felt like, is the sound of your bond trying to reach you through 2 centuries of silence." She began to read. She read names, pairs, connections. She read them clearly, without drama, without emotional embellishment, the way a doctor reads test results. Factual, precise, devastating. The first pair was a beta named Colin, from the northern pack, and an omega named Ruth, from the eastern pack. They were seated at different tables, mated to different wolves, and when Nora said their names together, Colin turned in his seat and looked at Ruth, and Ruth looked at Colin, and the expression on both their faces was the expression of someone who has just heard a sound they have been hearing in their dreams for 20 years and is realizing for the first time that it was real. The second pair was a guard named Peter and a healer named Dorothy. They worked in the same compound. They passed each other in corridors every day. They had never spoken, because Peter was bonded to a wolf from the Southern Pack's trade delegation, and Dorothy was assigned to the medical wing, and their orbits had been carefully, deliberately designed to never intersect. When Nora said their names, Peter made a sound, not a word. A sound, low and broken and involuntary, the sound of something locked away for so long that its release was not joyful but painful, the way blood returning to a numb limb hurts worse than the numbness ever did. She read 12 names before Philip stood up. "This is a fabrication," he said, and his voice was the voice of institutional authority, measured and certain and backed by 200 years of precedent. "This woman is unverified. Her bloodline is unconfirmed. The council has not authorized any bond seer assessment, and the claims she is making are designed to destabilize the political order of this territory." Nora did not stop reading. She read the 13th pair, the 14th, the 15th. "I demand this ceremony be halted," Philip said, and now his nothing face was cracking, and what was underneath was not anger but fear, the raw, exposed fear of a man watching the walls he built being taken apart brick by brick. Nora read the 16th pair. It was Philip's grandson, William, and an omega named Alice from the Western Pack. The omega who had been relocated to the southern border 6 years ago. The omega Philip himself had ordered removed. The hall turned to Philip. He did not speak. His face, which had held its careful nothing for decades, finally broke open, and what was inside was not the composed authority of an elder statesman. It was the panicked mathematics of a man whose own suppressed bond, his own buried truth, had just been spoken aloud in a room full of witnesses. Nora closed the notebook. "You can verify every name on this list," she said. "You can test every pair. You can bring in independent healers, outside seers, wolves from territories the council has never controlled. The bonds are real. They have always been real. The only thing that was fake was the system that told you they did not exist." She looked at the hall, 300 wolves, some weeping, some furious, some sitting perfectly still, with their hands pressed against their chests, feeling the hum for the first time, the vibration of a bond that had been silenced so long they had forgotten what their own body was trying to tell them. "I am not asking you to believe me," Nora said. "I am asking you to feel what you have always felt and stop pretending it is nothing." She set the notebook on the council's table. 4 pages of cramped handwriting, 47 truths. "You can keep lying," she said, "or you can start fixing it." She did not kneel. She walked down the dais steps, past the council, past Philip, whose face was still open and raw and undone, past the candidates who watched her with expressions that ranged from fury to a quiet, painful hope, past the wolves who were reaching for each other across tables and across years of silence. Ethan met her at the base of the dais. He took her hand. The bond between them hummed, steady and sure, a frequency that filled the hall like a tuning fork struck against the truth. Behind them, Alpha King Henry Cole sat down on his throne for the last time. He looked at his son and the kitchen girl with flour on her sleeve, and his face held the expression of a man who had spent 30 years building a kingdom on sand and had just watched someone plant a foundation in bedrock. He raised his hand. The hall went quiet. "The bond is recognized," he said. 3 words. The formal acknowledgement. The words that, once spoken by the reigning Alpha, could not be unsaid by any council, any statute, any protocol in the history of the wolf world. "The bond is recognized," he said again. And this time, the words were not ceremonial. They were personal. A father, acknowledging that his son had found something real in a world the father had spent his life keeping artificial. The hall erupted. Not into chaos this time, into something else. Into the sound of 300 wolves talking at once, some arguing, some weeping, some laughing with the disbelieving joy of people who have just been told that the ache they carried was not a flaw, but a feature. Nora stood in the middle of it with Ethan's hand in hers, and the hum in her teeth, finally, for the first time in her life, not hurting. It took her a moment to understand why. The hum had always been the sound of bonds straining against suppression, the sound of truth trying to reach through silence. Now, in this hall, with the notebook on the council's table, and the names spoken aloud, and the wolves beginning to turn toward each other with new eyes, the bonds were not straining anymore. They were singing. Nora closed her eyes and listened to 47 bonds singing in a hall full of wolves who were hearing the music for the first time. And she thought of her mother, who had heard this music too, and had paid for it with everything she had. She would find her. That was the next chapter. That was the work that waited beyond this night, beyond the political storms and the council's resistance, and the slow, painful process of rebuilding a system that had been built on silence. But tonight, standing in the great hall of Ironhold with flour on her sleeve and a bond humming in her chest, Nora Ellis was not silent anymore. She was never going to be silent again.